I mentioned a few weeks ago that trading can be a profession of missing out. That is, there will be trades that pass you by, and a lot of the trades that pass you by will inevitably do very, very well. And this is one of the things you just simply have to deal with as the trader. You can't buy everything all the time. That's just one of the limitations of the profession. It's just the way it is. But associated with that is the corollary that trading is also a profession of setbacks. It has to be because it's part of life, and life has setbacks. That is also just the way it is, which is why one of my great bugbears is when I see people post equity curves that have no drawdown. Drawdown is a function of trading. Drawdown is part of that messy process of getting things wrong, of things going awry. And let me use a personal example. I'm currently sitting here in a very, very clever sling, which transfers the weight of my arm to my waist. Why am I doing that? Well, I'm doing that because 2 weeks ago I had my rotator cuff repaired. I had managed to, my term is unzip my shoulder while bench pressing. Why is that important? Well, it's important because you may have recall that in some of these previous chats I'd mentioned the fact that I'd spent New Year's Eve in hospital having had a heart attack. And the part of my recovery from that was this notion that I would get back to doing 3K sessions in the pool, and was very, very much on track for that. And by a 3K session, I mean simply not a broken up session with rest intervals in between, but a session where you're running at about 70-75% for the entire 3K, and you just blast off. Now, unfortunately, your shoulder does most of the work in swimming, and I won't be back in the pool until probably March, because rotator cuffs are apparently irritatingly slow to recover when they've been surgically repaired. So what's the relevance of this to trading? Well, A, it is a setback, but B, it speaks to the conversations we've had before about goals. One of the issues that traders have is their setting of goals. They'll often set these nebulous goals such as, I wish to be a full-time trader, but with no quantification around that, with no timeline, no metric, no way to measure what that means or how you even transition to becoming a full-time trader. And if we go back to the way goals are structured, they're structured in the simple way of you have a goal, you have metrics underneath which measure your progress towards that goal, and then you have your process. And the process sits at the base of the pyramid and controls all things. It is the thing that drives you forward. Now, within that broad overarching pyramid, there are also micro pyramids that track your progress along the way. So the problem with an all-consuming goal, such as I will be a full-time trader, is it's very, very difficult to assess what metrics you would put in place to measure that by. And in turn, this places pressure upon your process or your trading system, your approach, because it exists somewhat within a vacuum. You don't actually know what's going on. So to come back to my situation, I won't be back in the pool for probably 3.5, 4 months. The return to swimming for rotator cuff injuries takes a very, very long time. Very annoying, very frustrating. My own stupidity. I really need to learn to act my age and stop paying for orthopedic surgeons' children to go through private school. But that's the way it's been for a very, very long time. So what do? You adapt, you improvise, you overcome. You reassess what the goal is. That goal still exists, but it's now had to be shelved. So what are the goals now? Well, the goals now are simple things. It is the capacity to stop my shoulder from freezing. It is the small passive range of motion exercises that I do several times a day. It is the fact that I still have an arm that works. I've still got 2 legs. I can't do the things I used to do in the gym. Can't bench, can't squat, can't deadlift. Can't do any Olympic lifting at all. It just won't work. But there are machines. I can use those. So the goals reassess and you realign for the time being. I can sit on an exercise bike, not a problem. But it is a process of structuring that in such a way that it still is a process that can be measured as a goal. And the goal is at present to recover from this little setback. So let's put this within the context of trading. Let's assume you've come into this recent market slippage as a long-only equities trader, and you've not in any way, shape or form taken any action to avoid your account being ripped to shreds, as most have for long equity traders over the past few months. You've now got to reassess what your goals were. You've now got to realign them with the reality of you're now operating, let's use an analogy, instead of operating on 8 cylinders, you're now operating on 4. And you have to find a way to get back to 8. You haven't sold out and moved into cash, which would have been the sensible thing to do several months ago when all macro filters switched off for markets. And like many, you just hung on bravely thinking it would always get better. So you're left with a diminished account. What do you do? Well, whilst this is not financial advice, and I cannot give financial advice despite having a financial license, you're going to have to adopt a strategy that works off your reduced amount of capital. You're going to have to adopt a strategy that works perhaps off the broader notion that markets might have undergone a shift that might actually last for 2 or 3 years. So if you were to persist with what you were doing, if you were to continue going down that road, you could render an argument that you'll not go anywhere for 2 or 3 years. And I do accept that that is what a proportion of individuals will do. They will simply sit there and wait and hope that things that get better. My preference would be to sit and take stock, to look at different aims. Well, your first aim would be preservation of the capital you got left. The next aim would be to look at the methodology that got you into this mess and to see what the contributing factors were there. But allied with that is the notion that, and this is the hardest one of all, you actually have to look at yourself and ask yourself the question, what did I do that got me into the shit so badly? Because that's a question I asked myself the moment I put the bar down and I knew my shoulder had unzipped itself. My first reaction was, why am I so stupid? Why was I attempting to max out? And I wasn't even attempting to max out. I was actually in a warm-up set. And the question I asked is, why was I so stupid pursuing this goal? Granted, it's an old goal. Benching has always been a thing. It's just one of the things. There are 3 big lifts that people do. There's bench press, squat, deadlift. That's it. And it's been that way with me for decades. But again, circumstances change. You change as an individual. The environment changes. And you have to reflect upon those changes and your role within those changes. And what part did you play? And it's a very, very difficult question for traders to ask and then answer, because it generally means that you hold the mirror up to your own idiocy. And it is your own idiocy. It is your own fault. If you have reached a point where your account has taken a savage malleting courtesy of the market, then that's your fault. That's not the market's fault. The market just is. It is not its fault. It has no malevolent intent for you. What it will do, though, is exacerbate your own stupidity and give you a forum to play out that stupidity. Just as letting me loose in a gym is a forum for me acting out my own stupidity. Once you've answered those questions, and they are very, very hard questions to answer within the context of trading, you will have to sit down, reorganize and regroup, and then look at the more functional issues of what does my trading methodology look like this? What have I taken on board, either consciously or subconsciously, that has convinced me that that notion of simply hanging on and praying was a good idea, when I know, courtesy of the evidence of my own account, that it is a silly idea, because it completely ignores the idea that markets go down and they go up. Now notice, there's two sides to that. They don't just go up. And I know a lot of the carry-on of late has been simply because people have assumed for the past generation that, courtesy of our very lax monetary policy, that markets only ever go up, they never go down. And they've also assumed that it is the role of reserve banks around the world to make certain that they only ever go up so that traders can be enriched. So this is why when you look at social media, you listen to commentary, you see and hear this vast range of people having literally a temper tantrum. It's like a 2-year-old who all of a sudden has been told that they can't have ice cream for breakfast, having had ice cream for breakfast every day of their lives. And it's the same thing. It's simply a tantrum. And it's a tantrum based upon an inability to recognise that it's not reality. The reality is markets will go up, markets will go down. So you have to ask the question, well, why did I ignore that? When I look at a chart of an index, why do I only see the bit where it starts here and goes there? Why did I not see all the other bits where it starts here and goes there? And it sometimes does that for years. So what story am I telling myself? And again, we come back to this notion of narrative, and that we all exist within our own narrative. We all want to be the hero of our own narrative. But part of the problem with our narrative is, particularly with traders, and particularly we'll come back to this notion of goal setting, of this, I want to be a full-time trader. A lot of that ignores the notion that this is a journey and that you have to be happy with the journey, because if you're not, it's a miserable existence if you only perceive that you'll be happy at the end. And a lot of people, when I speak to them over the years, ignore the fact that trading is this journey. Because they say, I want to be a full-time trader. Okay, when do you want to do that? Tomorrow. How are you going to do that? Well, I went to this course where they said I could trade Bitcoin full-time with $5,000. Knock yourself out, champ. Give us a call, let us know how it goes. There is a natural rhythm to these things and a natural process. And you have to respect the natural process. But the irritating thing about the process is, A, it takes time, much like shoulders do to recover. But it also requires that you ask yourself questions when things go wrong. And they have to be penetrating questions, and you have to be the centre of that question. You are the nexus point, the focus of all things that happen. As such, you have to place the blame and the responsibility on yourself. And because we act as ego defensive animals, that's immensely hard.